After my husband's funeral, Sister revealed that her son was my husband's child. The moment those words slipped out of her mouth, I felt the air leave my lungs. I was standing by the freshly covered grave, my black dress clinging to my skin, from the summer heat, when her boy tugged at her sleeve and asked with innocent eyes, "So, was he my real dad?" My sister froze, and for a second I thought she would dismiss it as childish confusion. But then she whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "He always was." My knees buckled. I remember grabbing onto the cold edge of the stone just to stop myself from collapsing into the dirt. My husband, the man I buried hours ago, the man I had trusted with every piece of my soul, had not just betrayed me in life, but left me with this poison to carry after his death. My mind rewound, frame by frame, through 12 years of marriage. I saw our wedding again, his steady hands holding mine as he swore I was the only woman he would ever love. I saw the nights when I cried into my pillow because we couldn't have children, when I thought it was my fault, my broken body. He held me, stroked my back, and told me it didn't matter, that we were enough. But now I realized he knew the truth all along. He could have children, just not with me. My nephew, my sister's child, was the cruel proof of that. The sting of betrayal burned deeper than grief. Grief is losing someone. Betrayal is realizing they were never yours. To begin with, my eyes locked on my sister. Her hands were trembling, clutching her son against her side as if I might rip him away. She avoided my gaze, and that avoidance told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a slip or a sudden truth revealed in grief. She had carried this secret for years, maybe even enjoyed the power of it, knowing she had something of him that I never would. And the worst part? Every holiday dinner, every birthday party, every family gathering, it had all been a theater production. My husband smiling at the boy like an uncle, my sister playing the doting mother, me, the fool in the middle, baking cakes, wrapping, gifts, taking pictures, completely oblivious that the two people I trusted most were hiding a bond far stronger than the one they pretended to have with me. My heart pounded in my ears. People were still gathered, murmuring condolences, touching. My arm saying he was a good man, a good man. I wanted to scream, to tear down every lie that had been spoken in his memory, to tell them all that the man in that coffin wasn't who they thought he was. But I didn't. I stood still, my face stone, my hands cold, my body screaming for me to collapse. I let them whisper and pray and leave flowers because I knew this wasn't the place. This wasn't the time. My revenge, my reckoning, my truth. That would come later. For now, I just stared at the woman who had not only stolen my husband's body, but shared his bloodline in her son. And for the first time in my life, I looked at my sister not as family, but as an enemy. I went home that night, but the word home felt like a joke. The house was filled with his things, his leather jacket still hanging by the door, his half-read books on the nightstand, the cologne bottle I could still smell when I closed my eyes. Everywhere I turned, reminders screamed at me, but none of them felt real anymore. They weren't tokens of love, they were props in a life built on deceit. I collapsed on the couch, my body shaking, my mind spinning. I remembered the IVF appointments, the endless tests, the awkward silence when the doctor told us it was unlikely we'd ever have children naturally. He squeezed my hand that day and said it didn't matter, that we were enough for each other. Now I realized he had already proven he was capable of fatherhood, just not with me. He let me carry that burden, the shame, the guilt, while my sister carried his child. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through the house like a ghost, touching walls, staring at wedding pictures, wondering how many of those smiles were real. Every memory I had was infected now. I thought about the times my nephew had laughed at my husband's jokes, how my husband always gave him extra attention, how I brushed it off as him being a sweet uncle. I had missed every sign. I wanted to hate the child, but I couldn't. He was innocent. He didn't ask for this. My rage was for the adults who lied, who robbed me of my dignity, who watched me suffer silently while they lived their twisted truth. By sunrise, my grief had hardened into something else. Resolve. I couldn't undo what they had done, but I could decide what happened next. And I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to be their fool anymore. The following week was a blur of paperwork, condolences, and empty conversations where people told me how strong I was. They had no idea. I was holding a storm inside me, and every smile I forced, every polite nod, only made it rage louder. My sister tried to call me several times, but I let the phone ring. She even came by once, standing at my doorstep with her son, her face pale and desperate. I didn't open the door. I just stood behind the curtain, watching her knock, watching her whisper something to the boy before they finally left. I wondered what lie she told him this time. How she explained why his aunt wouldn't see him. Each unanswered call, each ignored message, gave me back a little of the power they had stolen from me. I wasn't going to give her the chance to rewrite the story or to spin her betrayal into something softer. Not this time. Instead, I started going through my husband's office at home. I opened drawers, files, even his locked cabinet. Because what was left to hide? And there it was, tucked neatly away. A folder with bank statements, receipts, and wires that didn't make sense. Regular transfers to her, my sister, thousands over the years. Not one or two, but consistent payments. Disguised as loans, repairs, miscellaneous. I felt sick as I read line after line. He wasn't just her secret lover. He had been financing her life, their child, with our money, my money. All while standing in our kitchen, drinking coffee with me, pretending everything was fine. I slammed the drawer shut, my hands trembling, my throat burning with rage. It was no longer just betrayal of the heart. It was financial theft, deception on every level. And in that moment, I knew exactly how I was going to take back what was mine. I hired a lawyer the next morning. Sitting across from him, I laid out everything: the funeral, the confession, the folder of transfers I had discovered. He didn't flinch. He'd seen families rip each other apart over less. But when I slid those documents across the desk, he raised his brows and said quietly, "This isn't just betrayal. This is misappropriation. You have grounds." His words were the first bit of air I had breathed since the graveyard. For years, I had been the quiet, dutiful wife, the one who forgave too easily, who carried burdens in silence. Now, silence was over. My lawyer explained how we could freeze accounts, how the estate wouldn't pass quietly to me if we didn't move quickly, how my sister had no legal claim but could try to manipulate the narrative. I listened, I signed, I authorized. Every stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. That night, I sat in the kitchen staring at a cup of tea gone cold, thinking about the boy asleep in her house, thinking about the lies he was living under. A part of me wanted to shout the truth at him, to tear away the curtain, but another part whispered, "It's not his fault. It's hers. Always hers." Within days, the lawyer filed motions. Accounts were flagged, assets secured, letters sent. My sister tried again to reach me, this time with long messages about family, forgiveness, how he wouldn't want this. I almost laughed. He hadn't wanted the truth either, yet here it was, unraveling everything he left behind. When she finally realized I wasn't bending, she showed her true face. Threats, guilt, rage. But I didn't respond. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to her. I was leading, and she had no idea what was coming next. Weeks turned into months, and the war between silence and truth grew louder. My sister finally realized I wasn't bluffing when she received the first official notice. Her loans were being investigated. Her access to certain accounts was revoked, and the estate lawyer confirmed she had no legal claim to my husband's assets. She called me 22 times that day, her voice cracking on the voicemails, alternating between begging and threatening. "You can't do this to us." "To him," she said once, as if dragging my dead husband's name into her defense would somehow pierce me. But all it did was harden me further. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story into one of love or family ties. This wasn't romance. It was theft. It was betrayal. And now it was mine to expose. I found more evidence as the investigation unfolded: hidden accounts, transfers he made right after our wedding, money funneled into her mortgage, even tuition payments for her son, payments that came from accounts we shared. My money funding their secret life. Every discovery was another knife twisted into my back, but instead of weakening me, it fueled me. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was documenting. I was building. A case, brick by brick, and with every brick I was taking back control. I stopped answering her messages completely. My silence was louder than any scream I could have given her. People in town started noticing too. The whispers spread, not from me, but from her. She was unraveling in public, showing cracks, lashing out. And I stayed composed, calm, deliberate. I didn't need to yell my truth. I only needed the receipts, the evidence, and the law on my side. And when the day finally came for her to face it all, she wouldn't be standing in front of me. She would be standing in front of a judge. The court date finally arrived, and I walked into that room with my head high, my lawyer beside me, and a thick folder of evidence in my arms. My sister sat across the aisle, her face pale but defiant. Her son left at home with someone else so she could try to shield him from the storm she had created. For the first time since the funeral, we were forced to face each other without masks, without family dinners or hushed excuses. Just truth. The judge listened as my lawyer laid out years of hidden transfers, forged signatures, and financial betrayals that tied my late husband to her in ways that went far beyond a mistake. The documents spoke louder than either of us could. My sister tried to cry, tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming he pressured her, that she had no choice, that she was protecting me. But every time she opened her mouth, another piece of evidence crushed her words. The room was silent, except for the judge's questions and her stumbling answers. I didn't need to shout. I didn't even need to speak much. My presence, my silence, the sheer weight of the facts were enough. When the ruling came down, it was swift. She owed restitution, she was barred from touching any part of his estate, and the financial misappropriation would remain on her record. Her face crumbled, and for a moment I almost pitied her. But then I remembered the years she let me drown in guilt while raising his child in secret. That pity evaporated. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I had felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't the broken wife or the naive sister. I was the woman who had survived betrayal, clawed back her power, and stood unshaken in the face of their lies. And though the scars would never fade, I knew one thing with certainty. They would never control my story again. Life after the trial felt unfamiliar, almost like moving into a new house where every wall still smelled of paint. The silence was different now, not heavy with secrets, but wide open, waiting for me to fill it with something new. I began to clear out the things that weren't mine anymore. His clothes were boxed up, his books donated, even the photos of us together taken down from the walls. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about reclaiming my space. For the first time, my home looked like it belonged to me, not a stage set built on lies. People in town whispered, of course, they always do. Some pitied my sister, some pitied me, but I no longer cared about their versions of the story. The truth had been dragged into the light, and that was enough. She moved away not long after the judgment, ashamed and cornered, and though I sometimes caught myself wondering how the boy was doing, I reminded myself he would grow up one day and find his own answers. That wasn't mine to carry anymore. My revenge hadn't been about screaming or burning bridges. It had been about boundaries, about ending the cycle where I was the fool and they were the ones laughing behind closed doors. And standing in tights in my quiet kitchen one morning, sunlight pouring through clean windows, I finally let myself smile. Because in the end, revenge wasn't fire or fury. It was freedom. Months later, I found myself walking along the edge of the cemetery where it had all begun. But this time my steps were steady, not trembling. The grief had dulled into something quieter, something I could carry without collapsing under its weight. I stood at his grave, not with flowers, but with nothing at all, because I had no more illusions to give him. I spoke aloud, not for him, but for me. You don't own me anymore. Neither of you do. And with that, I turned away, leaving the stone behind like a closed chapter. I started therapy soon after, something I had always dismissed as unnecessary. But in those sessions, I found pieces of myself I didn't even know I had lost. The girl who used to laugh without fear, the woman who wanted more than survival. Slowly, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my trust in myself. Opportunities I'd once ignored began to appear. A new job offer, friends inviting me out, even small things like signing up for a class I had always wanted to take. Every yes I gave was another stitch in the fabric of the new life I was weaving. And as for my sister, the distance grew permanent. No calls, no visits, no apologies could bridge what she destroyed. She belonged to a past version of me, and that woman no longer existed. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but finally mine. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I welcomed it. A year after the funeral, I hardly recognized the woman I used to be. The hollow eyes staring back in the mirror back then had been replaced with something sharper, steadier. I wasn't naive anymore, but I wasn't broken either. I had learned that survival wasn't just about breathing through the pain. It was about choosing who you let stand beside you once the smoke cleared. I sold the house we had shared, the place that had felt like a mausoleum of lies, and moved into a smaller home near the coast. It was mine alone, and for the first time, every corner reflected me, not us, not him, not the ghost of promises broken. I filled it with books I loved, pictures of trips I took by myself, laughter of friends who proved their loyalty in silence when everything else fell apart. Some nights I still dreamed of the boy, my nephew, though even that word felt twisted. Now. In those dreams he asked me questions, his face older, searching for the truth. And each time I woke, I reminded myself that one day the truth would reach him, whether from me or someone else. But it would not define me anymore. My sister's name no longer carried weight in my life. She had become nothing more than a cautionary tale, a reminder of how deep betrayal can cut, and how far resilience can carry you out of the wreckage. And though scars lined every memory, I carried them with pride. Proof that I had lived through the kind of storm that should have drowned me, and yet here I stood, free, unbroken, and finally my own. 2 years later, I stood on a balcony overlooking the sea, the wind tangling through my hair, the salt air clean and untainted by old ghosts. The woman who once clung to lies in a crumbling marriage was gone. In her place stood someone who had bled, burned, and rebuilt herself from the ground up. Sometimes people still asked about him, about my late husband, about my sister, and I learned to answer with a steady calm. He's gone, I would say, and so is she. No elaboration, no bitterness, just truth cut clean. I no longer felt the need to explain, to justify, to relive. Their betrayal was part of my story, yes, but no longer the headline. It was just a chapter, one that ended the moment I chose myself over their secrets. I had built a life far from their shadows. New friends, a job I loved, even the quiet courage to travel places I had only ever dreamed of before. On nights when I sat alone, listening to the waves crash against the shore, I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. Wholeness wasn't about having someone beside me. It was about knowing I didn't need them to stand tall. My revenge hadn't been fire-consuming them. It had been the cold, undeniable fact that I survived, thrived, and moved forward while they were left to choke on the ashes of their own choices. And as I closed my eyes to the sea, I whispered the final words I hadn't been able to say at his grave. You didn't destroy me. You freed me. Years have passed now, and when I look back, I no longer see only betrayal and loss. I see a woman who was dragged through fire and walked out the other side stronger than anyone ever expected. The weight of their deception nearly broke me, but it also reshaped me. My husband's lies, my sister's cruelty, they could have left me hollow, bitter, and defeated. Instead, they forced me to strip my life down to its foundation and rebuild it piece by piece on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift hidden inside their betrayal. The chance to finally live as myself, not as a supporting character in someone else's story. There are moments even now when I catch myself remembering things. The way he used to smile across the dinner table, the way she used to braid my hair when we were children. But those memories no longer have the power to twist inside me. They're just fragments of a past that doesn't control me anymore. I don't keep their pictures, I don't replay their words, and I certainly don't carry their shame. What they did belongs to them. What I've built since belongs to me. My days are simple now. Quiet mornings with coffee on the balcony, the sea stretching endlessly before me, long walks at sunset where I breathe without fear, laughter with people who don't hide knives behind their backs. I found work that I love, friends who became chosen family, and most importantly, I found myself. For so many years, I had lived in shadows, of infertility, of secrets, of lies told with a straight face. Now I live in the open, in the light. Sometimes, people still ask about him, about her, and I answer with calm. He's gone, and so is she. No bitterness, no need for explanations. Their betrayal was part of my story, yes, but it's no longer the headline. It's just a chapter that ended the moment I chose myself over their secrets. My revenge wasn't about destroying them, or screaming until the world believed me. It was about something quieter, sharper, far more lasting. I survived. I thrived. I moved forward. And I left them trapped in the ruins of the lies they built. Now, when I stand by the water and close my eyes, I whisper the words I never managed to say at his grave, "You didn't destroy me. You freed me." Because that's what the truth really gave me, freedom. The kind of freedom they'll never taste, because it comes only when you stop living in lies. So here I am, alive, whole, and finally free. And maybe that is the sweetest revenge of all. Tell me, did I go too far or not far enough? This story was created by me, the author behind the channel Revenge with Sarah. If you felt the pain, the betrayal, and the strength in this journey, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And tell me in the comments, did she go too far or not far enough? Your thoughts keep this community alive.